Hello, my humans. This is a controversial opinion video about alternate theories and why I'm not convinced yet. This is Monday the 6th. I've recorded this on Sunday the 5th of February, just to give you some timeline context of why I don't think at this moment that Alex Murdaugh is our murderer. The rest of the internet has this guy already strung and hung out to dry. However, I have been watching the trial every day with Emily D. Baker since it started, and I am not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Alex Murdaugh is our killer. I did a shorts video that gives some highlighted reasons, and I'm expanding on that now. Please remember that this is my opinion, and somebody is innocent until proven guilty, and they're not there for me, and that lies with the prosecution. So let's start with that. I can't follow the prosecution. If I wasn't watching Emily D. Baker and her giving a timeline on her quick bits and commentary as we were going along, I would just be lost. I'm still lost and I'm watching it, but I'm just find myself going, the prosecution's all over the place. They're not giving me a storyline and timeline that goes this, guilt. I'm getting, what? Don't get me wrong, I think bro is still sus, and I don't think he's a good person, okay? He hurt a lot of people with his fraud and stealing. I don't think he's a good guy, but being financially irresponsible and being a murderer are a far cry from each other. So if you want some alternate, who else could have done this? All the people he screwed over. His stealing from a client could have put them in financial ruin, and they lost their family, their husbands, wives, or whoever left them and took their kids, and they were left with nothing. They weren't able to return to work because of their injuries, because he was an accident and injury lawyer. So he's taking money from hurt people, and he screwed over a lot of people. Let's not remember Stephen Smith, Mallory Breach, and the Statterfields. Those are all people who have other family members who might have vengeful spirits, who could have been like, you know what, they're not doing the justice what we want. The legal system is taking too long, or they're not. Stephen Smith's family didn't feel like they got justice, so maybe they took it into their own hands. And the guy who confessed to being hired by Alex Murdaugh to shoot him in the head, the murderer for hire, maybe he was a killer for hire, but from somebody else. Okay? Someone else could have set him up, and he's using this as a cover-up to clear his own name and get out of his own situation. Other people could be vengeful against him and his family. Like, you know what? Alex Murdaugh made me lose everything. I'm going to take what he has left from him. Which leads me to the multiple weapons used to commit the murder. I find it very odd that somebody in a couple minutes time span would use two different guns. Like, what's the purpose of that? Do you think you're getting away with something? Because right now, dude's been indicted, so it didn't help him that much. And I don't know if anybody in a moment of, a passion panic thing would have thought to have two ready weapons able to switch them out. One person, like, maybe he was involved and he was one of the shooters, or maybe he was neither. It's the two weapon thing is very odd and off-putting. The bullet casings and shells around the bodies, they were at the hunting area and by the kennels, and the friend Wills said that they had been in March. They were in that area sighting, which means, you're lining up a gun, you're shooting it a couple times to make sure that the scope is lined up with your shots. So there are going to be the gun casings from the guns on the property all over the place, and the bodies fell on top of those things. And they said that lots of people had access, easy access to those weapons and stuff. So for there to, it's like, yeah, those weapons were on the ground, but they were on the shooting grounds. Of course, there's going to be casings and pellets and stuff around the hunting area. All over the place, in fact. Why didn't Alex Murdaugh hear shots if he wasn't there and there was a Snapchat video that showed he was there. Well, maybe he was, near the property, because the friends had mentioned that it's less than a minute walk to get to the main house from the kennels. So maybe he really was inside getting ready to lay down and take a nap, or he had been napping and, whatever. But, maybe if he heard shots, he didn't think anything of it at the time, because his son Paul, who was an avid hunter, was on the grounds, and maybe he thought that he was out shooting some hogs. And so he didn't question if he heard shooting, and it didn't occur to him that maybe Paul was hunting and he didn't go check, because that's common. The gunshots on a hunting ground with lots of people having access to it, not unusual. But he lied. He said he wasn't there, and he was there because of the Snapchat video. I have never been in a situation where I found a loved one brutally murdered, and I hope that you or I never have to experience that. But I have been in situations where I was scared and afraid, and my mind's going 100 miles an hour. So finding your loved ones brutalized outside of your home, I can't imagine the feelings and rush of emotion and intensity that does to somebody. So, maybe he said things that didn't make sense. They weren't necessarily lies. It was just confusing. It happened so fast that he tried to get a hold of people, so he already has concern in his head. He's already a traumatized man. He had just lost his father. His career was going down the drain. His mother has Alzheimer's, and he said that he was out visiting her. And so, there's a lot of bad going on with this man. And then to go out and find that, you're telling me that that's not going to make somebody say some crazy stuff when they're on the phone? He sounded upset on the 911 call. And so maybe he in the rush, he went to go check for their pulse, and then he saw that they were the state they were in, and he stopped, and he was just trying to get help. So he called 911, and they were like, did you check their pulse? Yeah, I checked their pulses. Just get here, just get help. And stuff like that. You get confused. What did I do? What didn't I do? You can't think straight in those situations. So let's give the man, I'm saying he's a bad man, but let's give the man a bit of humanity, that maybe finding his loved ones there was just horrific for him and he couldn't think straight. The confession. It's not a confession to me, everybody. I'm sorry, my humans. But first of all, that recording, as I mentioned in my shorts, sounded like a ghost hunter's recording. I'm wrong. I couldn't understand it very clearly at all. I'm merely going by the testimony of the officer who was physically there with him when he said it. And he said, I did him so bad. That's not necessarily a confession to me. He could have thought, he put his family in a situation where they were targets. Maybe they were targets. Again, he screwed over a lot of people and hurt a lot of people who could have had him and his family in their sights. And so maybe, I did him so wrong refers to being a father. If he would have been a better father to show his son more responsibility, then, the guns wouldn't have ended up in the wrong hands, couldn't have been stolen from his truck. Maybe if he had been a better father and provider, he wouldn't have felt the need to steal to try to keep the family's beach home. Maybe that his wife loved so much. Maybe if he had been a better father, his son wouldn't have been irresponsibly drinking on a boat that caused a whole bunch of other chaos. Maybe he feels fatherly responsible for all those things, and maybe he thought he did them wrong in that sense. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a confession. It could just mean he's getting all this stuff off of his chest that, if he had done right by his family, they would still be here with him. And right now, what the jury hasn't seen, the biggest thing is the financial stuff that's in evidentiary as I'm recording this. That's the situation. The judge hasn't ruled on it. And so I'm like, Do I think, yes, there's no doubt about it, that Alex Murdaugh stole from people, stole from clients, stole from the Statterfields, and stole from his firm. But again, as I said at the beginning, financial crimes and double homicide of his family, very big gap between those two things. And one, they are mutually exclusive. One does not mean the other. So yeah, I'm just saying that the man was upset. He's been through a lot, which he did a lot of it to himself, but he had some enemies. He could have been targeted. Maybe people were mad about all the things that the Murdaughs had gotten away with up to that point. Somebody could have been after Paul, and they just happened to see Maggie and were like, we got to take that one out too. There's a lot of other things that could have occurred other than Alec being the murderer. Maybe he was one of two. Maybe he hired two. Maybe he had nothing to do with the murders and he's just a financially terrible criminal in that way. And he now has 3 lost family members to no fault of his own. I'm just giving some alternate theories. You're allowed to disagree with me politely. And I mean, maybe by the end of this week in the court case, I'll be like, oh. No, you're bad, dude. And like, again, there's a lot of sus things. He was there with the Snapchat video. He did say there were a lot of holes through his story that I tried to provide alternates for. And, there's a lot of funny business going on that makes me go, but it also doesn't make me go guilty. So that's my take on it. I hope you all have a good rest of your weekend. Let's find out what happens in this trial.